My name is Rich Munroe. I'm with Diamond Edge Properties, and I'm based here in Atlanta. My wife and I have been doing short-term rentals for a little over 5 years now, and we have about 38 listings total. We've got properties in Atlanta as well as in Tampa, Florida. We just expanded down there earlier this year. And so we basically host the BNB Investing group. It's free for all REI USA members. We do this the first Tuesday of every month. It is recorded on the platform. So if you miss a presentation, you can feel free to go back and check out some of the prior months. So what I'm going to do this week is basically cover something, just kind of some high-level stats that are in the market as to what's going on with the short-term rental occupancy and some of the trends, obviously directly affected and or impacted negatively and positively by the pandemic. But I wanted to go through some stats, and then I'm going to spend a little bit of time today on something that I very rarely do, and most folks don't really focus on, but I think it's an important aspect of the short-term rental model, and that is making sure that you're maximizing your occupancy by looking at other platforms. And so we're going to spend a part of the presentation today looking at VRBO HomeAway, which is now owned by the Expedia Group, and looking at some options to basically maximize your occupancy by going out to that platform and kind of learning a little bit more from a statistical standpoint how that platform works. Historically, VRBO and HomeAway have been predominantly for vacation rentals. So, beachfront properties on the lake and the mountains that have done really well. However, they also have done quite well with properties that a lot of our investors are doing short-term rentals with. They're not necessarily in vacation spots. And so even properties that are in the city or in the suburbs that don't necessarily have any vacation attraction attached to it. So needless to say, the US home monthly short-term rental occupancy, as you can see from this chart, basically during 2021 has exceeded the 3 prior years. And for some of the obvious reasons that you guys probably know about, given the shift in the way folks are thinking and not staying at hotels and wanting to kind of have that free check-in and check-out process and have the comfort of a larger home with a kitchen and so on. So that trend continues even through the fall, as far as the occupancy levels being averaging around 59% and still surpassing the prior years, which I think is definitely kind of a good indication of what we can expect going forward into the future. This chart is actually looking at the 7-day average nights booked compared to the prior years. And, you can see that in 2021, those average nights have definitely gone on the higher side. Historically, pre-pandemic, the average stay for short-term rentals was 3 to 5 days. And so we have definitely seen an uptick in those average number of nights being more during COVID. People are able to work remotely and have the flexibility to have longer stays in various places that they're traveling. Same thing with the longer term stays. This is actually looking at the 28 plus day bookings as a percentage of total nights booked. And definitely, obviously during the pandemic, I think we had a lot of bookings that were folks that were trying to stay in kind of quarantine mode, and 30, 40, 50, 60. We had a lot of 60 and 90-day bookings during that time. So it's definitely demonstrated by the March, April, May timeframe. And that continues to trend kind of more averaging going below what it typically would have been during the pandemic. This is looking at the change in the short-term rental demand in as far as the type of listings, right, or location. looking at the small city, rural, compared to the coastal resort, mountain, lakes, mid-sized city, and then kind of an average of all the United States, and then large city versus suburban versus urban. Definitely just showing kind of the trends of what that demand has looked like compared to the 2019 year. So another stat that's been that we're currently looking at is the U.S. markets with the highest net increase in listings over the last 2 years, and this is pretty interesting. I mentioned earlier, some of you already knew we expanded down into the Tampa market. It looks like some of our listings might be included in that gain, but Tampa, Florida has 950 new listings over the last 2 years for a 28% increase. Some of the other notables, obviously Myrtle Beach, Panama City, have been not only increase in listings, but they've also been classified from a rental arbitrage strategy to be highly desirable in terms of the lowest rent possible compared to what you can get as revenue. And so there's no surprise there that you have Myrtle Beach and Panama City being part of the list of the net gains in listings year over year. As we go into the holidays, most of you that have been doing short-term rentals kind of know historically, even in some of the areas that don't necessarily have too much change in the season, you're still going to have a dip during the holidays as far as lower occupancy, compared to the rest of the year. And so this is looking at how, again, 2021 is kind of trending in the other direction as families are trying to, see each other after not being around a lot of family and being able to travel. And so we're seeing a lot more, not only increases in occupancy for those holidays coming up, but also in the premium that we're able to command as a price. So we went from 2019 during Thanksgiving for $267 as an average night. Now we're almost $80 higher than that of a $346 nightly average. And so definitely, things are looking good as far as increased occupancy, as well as increased the nightly rate that we can command during the holidays. Another look kind of at the different areas that are the least expensive markets for holiday travel, just based on the analytics that AirDNA has. Cleveland, Ohio, Oklahoma City, Boise, Idaho, Wilmington, North Carolina, Spokane, Washington are all kind of the least expensive places to go for holiday travel. And then the most expensive markets, Aspen, Colorado, which is no surprise at a $1,400 average daily rate, Park City, Utah, Telluride, Colorado, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and then Coachella Valley in California. So a lot of those destinations during the holidays are definitely priced much higher than usual. So pretty straightforward. I always like to take a look at what the market's doing and kind of what the pricing is doing, so you can kind of help guide your own pricing on your listings. And so it's good to kind of see statistically what the average is doing and what it's doing across different markets. So, one of the things that, like I mentioned earlier on, this is one of our channel managers for some of our Atlanta properties. And so, as you can see, no matter what you do, the vast majority of your bookings are going to come via Airbnb. There's a reason why Airbnb is as popular as it is and is gaining on so much traction. You're definitely going to get the vast majority of your bookings through the Airbnb platform. As you can see, there are in Atlanta, there are a couple of bookings that I have that are through VRBO and HomeAway. Most of our properties on this list here are 1 or 2 bedroom condos in Midtown. And so the VRBO listing doesn't really lend itself favorably to those types of listings. There are a few larger homes on here that typically would do better. But again, it's always good to have multiple platforms that allows you to basically maximize your calendar. Here's a look at our Tampa properties. And as you can tell, so most of our Tampa properties are 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes. And so we get a much bigger traction from VRBO and or HomeAway in terms of bookings. It's still definitely, obviously the majority are Airbnb, like I said, but the Tampa market seems to have a little bit better traction. Now, keep in mind, none of our properties currently are on the ocean or near the ocean. Most of these properties are within a 30 to 45-minute drive from the beach. And so yet they still are able to command a pretty good presence on VRBO HomeAway. So don't let the location of your property deter you from doing that. Let's see, someone's asking to make a primary slide. Sure, we can do that. Let me see how I can change it. Let's see if it lets me go back in here. All right, is that better? All right, good. All right, so moving right along. So one of the things that VRBO does is they do a pretty good job of kind of running surveys amongst their guests as well as their hosts. And this was a survey they ran as far as travelers that were using VRBO, kind of what are the must-have technologies that they like to use. And not surprising, high-speed internet is kind of the number one. Streaming services, again, not surprising. Pretty much all of our properties have smart TVs with Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu. Not only is it more economical to do it that way, so you don't have a cable bill, but it's typically a preferred mode of travelers. Conveniently located USB ports. One of the things that hosts tend to overlook, especially in the bedrooms, is making sure that you've got easy access to plug in a charger or a plug. There's usually alarm clocks that you can get that have those ports already built in. That's kind of a dual purpose, and definitely make sure that's a part of your checklist when you're setting up a property. Contactless check-in. Most of us have. If you don't, you should strive to have electronic codes or electronic access so that each user or each guest can have a code that only works for them during the stay. And it's also kind of good from a security standpoint. Smart home speakers, something I've recently started adding, which is kind of a good feature. They have a lot of different options now that are smaller and they're very inexpensive and just convenient for folks that are staying to not only have the TV there but also have kind of a smart home speaker as another option. And then home office printer scanner. As more people are working remotely and traveling and working remotely, that's kind of an additional thing that is recently being requested. And a lot of times you also have people that are traveling for business, and they have a need to kind of have access to a printer and be able to print. So if you have that, especially in some of the larger listings, it's good to incorporate that. And then they're looking at kind of specifically the types or the age of the folks that have as a percentage that these items are important to. One other thing, again, if you've been doing this for a while, you should already know this, that the number one reason travelers click on property is based on the photos. So you should definitely make sure you've got updated and professional listing pictures on whether it's on Airbnb or VRBO, because it's such a critical part. 83% said photos are important in deciding to book a property for the obvious reasons. you're able to kind of visualize what the property looks like. And the more pictures you have, the better. And so even if you have to point out to a lot of people, keep in mind, a lot of folks are using these platforms. They're fairly new to it. And so, a lot of people are accustomed to traveling and going into hotels. So to the extent you can demonstrate, if you've got a coffee maker, you've got a fully equipped kitchen, definitely take some pictures of those items to kind of point that out so that the guest is aware of that. The more pictures, the better. And so make sure that you've got a minimum of 25 photos, if not more. I mean, we have some properties where we have 60 photos. So it just depends on the size and the type of property that you have. Okay, these are a little bit more detailed. These are stats directly from the VRBO platform, which I thought would be interesting. Again, because I'm in the Atlanta market and the Tampa market, these are basically just side-by-side comparisons to what's going on as far as the number of bedrooms that are being rented on the VRBO platform. So on the left-hand side, that's the Atlanta market. On the right-hand side, that's the Tampa market. Very, very similar. Obviously, one big thing that's a differentiating factor is the revenue, right? So even though Tampa is a much smaller market, there are a couple thousand listings compared to Atlanta market being 10,000. They have more revenue. So they're at 97,000 in revenue on the 5 bedrooms, where Atlanta is 53,000. And again, I think that lends itself more to the Florida market having more kind of vacation beach type properties that drive the revenue number up. Now it's looking at basically the occupancy rates in the Atlanta market compared to the Tampa market. And same thing here, you're definitely looking at a little bit of a higher occupancy rate in Tampa, as well as these are interesting stats as far as the pricing, the average daily rate by bedroom count. And so the Atlanta market has, a little bit higher on the smaller 1 and 2 bedrooms. $139 and $200 is an average daily rate. And the Tampa market has a little bit lower than that. Although once you start looking at the larger properties, 5 bedroom plus, your Tampa market is definitely going higher at $842 compared to $670 for Atlanta. So again, that Tampa market definitely has a little bit of a higher threshold for premium on pricing. And this other piece looks at basically the top searched features and amenities. And statistically, a swimming pool or a hot tub has been kind of in high demand for the obvious reasons, with folks doing staycations and wanting to be able to do that with having some of those types of amenities. And so pools and or hot tubs are definitely something, if you have in your investment strategy or as you're looking at properties, that's something definitely that you should look into considering. So on the VRBO platform, does anyone have any questions? Are other folks using the VRBO platform as well, or is it something that you guys have been considering? If you want to respond in the chat box. All right, so yeah, and so Valley is considering it. It goes back to the being able to maximize your occupancy. And so obviously, the more folks you have booking, on your listing, the more revenue you're going to generate. There are some nuances with VRBO that are a little bit different from Airbnb. From a kind of a con standpoint, Airbnb does really well with their resolution center and their insurance guarantee. VRBO, not so much in terms of having that be ironclad. Airbnb is pretty consistent. If the guest damages something at your property and you follow the protocol of reaching out to the guest and providing documentation, pictures and/or receipts, they will typically cover that within a reasonable time, usually within a couple of weeks. With VRBO, at least from my experience, they don't have as a robust process to do that. So what I would encourage you to do is also, there's some different warranty programs that you can look into that the guests can pay during their stay for a warranty that can protect you if there's any damages that occur during the stay for VRBO. One of the other differences as well, which depending on the channel manager that you use, obviously it's critical to have the ability to make sure that you do not have multiple bookings or double bookings. And so you definitely, if you are going to add VRBO or any of the other platforms, make sure that you have a channel manager that you're using to not only manage the calendar and the bookings, but also all of the interaction can flow through that one platform for communication with the guest, for making any adjustments to the reservation, as well as collecting the money. And so when you set up with VRBO, again, Airbnb does an awesome job at collecting payments. You very rarely have any issues with having to chase down the guests to collect money during their stay or after their stay. So with VRBO, it's your responsibility to set that up in the beginning to make sure that you're automatically capturing that credit card information to get the payment from the guest when they're booking. And so depending on your channel manager, that's something that they can help you with when you initially add those listings, to make sure that you have that set up properly to automatically collect that money. If you don't do that, then you're going to have people stay at the property and then leave without you having the ability to collect the money from them. So it's, again, something that's very simple that we take for granted with Airbnb, that that VRBO and some of the other platforms honestly don't do as good a job with it. All right, are there any other questions about VRBO or any of the stats that we looked at? Okay, Deborah, that's a great question. How do the fees compare? So Airbnb charges the host 3%, and VRBO charges the host 5%. And so it's a little bit more of a cost from that side. VRBO, very much like Airbnb, also charges the guests separately, but from the host standpoint, it definitely is a little bit more expensive than Airbnb, 5% compared to 3%. Valley was asking, should we enter markets that have a lot of increase in STR properties already, or look elsewhere? So that's a good question. I mean, when we first started, knowing that we were going to focus strategically on short-term rentals, the thought process was, why reinvent the wheel? Go to where you already have a large number of listings, a large number of bookings, and why try to recreate the wheel? And so that was our thought process in the beginning. That's why we have a lot of properties down in Virginia Highlands and in Midtown Atlanta, Ponce City Market. It's walkable to a lot of places. And so now I'm actually a little bit of a different opinion because as most of you know that are here in Atlanta, there's a lot of different short-term rental ordinances that are causing issues with not being investor friendly. The city of Atlanta is actually preventing investors from doing single family residence effective March 2022. And the only way that you can do a short-term rental is if you have a primary residence in the city of Atlanta and you can do one additional property besides your primary residence. And so anybody that's an investor that is currently doing short-term rentals in the city of Atlanta, they're not going to have the ability to do it without having the city of Atlanta have come after you to fine you for it. So there are strategic advantages right now to look at other areas that aren't necessarily high volume, but maybe more friendly to the ordinances being already defined, or that that don't have any restrictions on short-term rentals. And so that's what I would recommend. We've actually started another nonprofit association called the Atlanta Metro Short-Term Rental Alliance that is going to be having conversations and discussions and encouraging folks to do lobbying efforts because the Atlanta City Council is still trying to figure out a lot of the details on that new ordinance, not only as it applies to single family residents, but as it applies to condos and multifamily and commercial properties. And so there's still some details to be worked out in the city of Atlanta. And so we're hoping to participate in that. And for those of you that would like to kind of keep informed on that, if you're not already a member of our Facebook group, please look us up and join the Atlanta Short-Term Rental Investors. We'll have some updates on that Facebook group as we have. There's actually a meeting coming up at the Atlanta zoning November 18th that is going to vote on two pieces of legislation. One, it just outright, which is kind of odd, but it outright will prevent you from doing short-term rentals with ADUs, assisted dwelling units, which includes tiny homes, carriage houses, basements in the city of Atlanta. And so that's a pretty big one. There's a lot of tiny homes that have done quite well since the R5 zoning has opened up about 4 years ago in Atlanta. And so there's a lot of folks that are getting supplemental income by renting out their main house and staying in the tiny house or vice versa. And so that's it's going to be a pretty bad negative impact if they pass that restriction. The other part of the proposal that they're having the hearing on November 18th is actually quite favorable because it's basically saying that they will include other zoning classifications in the current short-term rental ordinance, which means that they would allow short-term rentals for all other zoning classes. I'm not sure why they're carving out ADUs. It's kind of odd, but unfortunately that's what they're doing. So if you want to be involved or if you're in Atlanta, again, please join the Atlanta Short-Term Rental Investors Group and keep informed so that you can know how you can participate. So no, the question was, doesn't the city of Atlanta get tax revenue from all of the rentals? So up until now, and that's one of the reasons why they've defined this new ordinance, the city of Atlanta has not been taking any tax revenue from any of the short-term rentals that have been happening in Atlanta, over the last 10, 15 years. That's one of the reasons why they tried to put these rules in place. And so that's part of what the new ordinances are going to define is the collection of those taxes. Fulton County and some of the other counties in Georgia about a year ago started collecting on short-term rental revenue county taxes. And so that's been going on for a little over a year now, but the city of Atlanta has not been collecting any tax revenue. And so, I think there's been a lot of debates and a lot of back and forth regarding, at first they wanted to outright ban short-term rentals altogether, and now they've kind of voted in this new ordinance that is honestly not that favorable to investors, but we shouldn't be surprised because historically, this is kind of the same thing that's happened in all of the other major cities in the United States and across the world. As the short-term rental ordinances are defined, they typically have some component of the starting point being that it has to be your primary residence. And a lot of the cities do that for the housing crisis and shortage of housing. And then unfortunately, Airbnb, statistically, the vast majority of listings on Airbnb are individual listings, right? So something like 90% plus are one-off listings, which doesn't really impact Airbnb too much as far as their lobbying efforts go. They're not looking out for people that are investing in larger numbers of listings. And so, unfortunately, that's kind of what we're faced with, having to fight some of those battles on our own. All right, any other general questions? As I said, we were this week this month we kind of just looked at statistics and the VRBO platform. It's something that we very rarely do, so I wanted to make sure that we put that as one of our meetings, that we addressed that option, because again, I think it's definitely an important one to consider. If you guys don't have any other questions, I think we will definitely close on that. Unless somebody else has anything we want to cover before we close the meeting. All right, so Valley asked, I can't remember, do you own all of your properties or rental arbitrage? Some. So Diamond Edge Properties has a mixture of properties that we own, properties that we have rental arbitrage, and then we also manage some of the properties for other investors. And so that is the management side of our business, as well as for properties that we own. And so that's the beauty of this business. When you build something and you put everything in place that's scalable, you can basically implement and add additional listings to the same process that you have in place. A lot of our things are automated through the channel manager. We have virtual assistants that do a lot of the guest communications. And whether it's a property that we own or a property that we're managing for someone else, we basically treat it all the same way and focus on maximizing revenue for that listing. All right, so again, these monthly webinars are recorded and are on the REI USA platform. So feel free to go back and peruse and check out some of the previous month's meetings. And if there is a meeting that you are not able to attend, just know that these are recorded and you can go back and check it out later. Let's see, Rebecca says, if the app you use, is the app you use working well now? I see so many comments of it crashing. So what app are you referring to, Rebecca? The Channel Manager app or the VRBO app? Oh, Guesty. No, we've been using Guesty from the very beginning, and we have never had any technical issues of it crashing. There might have been one over the last 5 years, but that's not something that's pretty typical. I don't know that. I don't know why people would have that issue. So that app has some bad reviews. Okay, well, I don't really use it as an app. It's a platform that you can. Well, you do have. So the app itself, I see what you're referring to now. So there is an app version of Guesty that you can use for your cleaners and for your maintenance folks to synchronize on the same calendar. And yes, I agree. The app is a little bit quirky. However, when you're running the channel manager, when you're putting multiple listings and you're basically doing your communications, you're basically doing that on a desktop, and the desktop version of Guesty works fine. But I agree with you, the app is kind of, it is a little quirky. So I know what you're referring to now. Yeah. All right, so thanks for that, Rebecca. Thanks everyone for jumping on this week, this month, and hope everybody got some insight to what's going on in the market and some more info on VRBO. And we'll continue to update you guys on any things that come up and change, and hopefully we can have some positive things come out of the city of Atlanta, because it's going to be an uphill battle. But hope to see you guys next month. And thanks again for jumping on. Everybody take care.